So, yes, indeed, 2012 has been much the buzz, and the Zetas said because it's far enough out, and has been since 2-3 years ago when they started talking about it, that everybody would say, okay, but that's a ways off. I'll just stay at my job. I'll play my video games. I'll pay my bills, because who knows? In other words, it was far enough in the future not to be a threat to the establishment. And much has been made. The Horizon Project has said, it's where we're going to align with the galactic center. Well, something that distant, wouldn't be what's causing. You can read in the geology of the Earth that we have these pole shifts every 3,600 years or so. Unquestionably, we can read this in the mammoths who died up in the Arctic Circle with green grass in their tummies. This was from a crustal shift, etc. And the flood of legend worldwide happened 3 pole shifts back, approximately 10,800 years ago.
Are we maybe looking at a date prior to 2012 for
we
this?
We could or later. And my sources, the Zetas, will not say if it's before or after. They are absolutely firm on this. They have given very precise definitions of what the last weeks will be like, and that we can expect the pole shift end of April, end of August, or end of December, not saying which year. But the last weeks will happen within a 4-month period leading into one of those dates. They've been very precise about, an increased wobble, the Earth seeming to flop over on its left side as Planet X comes from its right, swinging the North Pole back out away from the sun into 3 days of darkness, then standing upright and being drawn closer to Planet X, closer toward the sun, very scary time, in which Planet X will seem huge in the sky, slowing our rotation until finally we stop with the sun over Egypt, China and our west coast more or less on the dark side of the Earth. And then after 5.9 days of this rotation stoppage, an hour of the pole shift, then Planet X takes off because the pole shift is caused by it taking off over our head anyway. And then a rotation resumes and what the world will look like afterwards. So they're very precise about all of that, but no date.
What do you make of the lack of solar activity in recent months? I know there's been a lot said about it, and I know scientists are quite concerned as well. What do you make of that?
Well, the Zetas have been asked about that because, the sun was going to be one thing the establishment was going to use as an excuse. They were going to say, well, all this stuff is going on because the sun is having a very violent solar, cycle, and they were hyping it up that 2012, 2011, 2013, or whatever was supposed to be the solar maximum was going to be horrific. Well, the sun went to sleep. We have hardly any. I think it's now 700 days with no sunspots.
Right. Unprecedented, apparently.
Unprecedented sleepiness. The solar wind is practically quiescent, and so they can't. And the solar flares, there just is nothing that they could even ascribe static on the radio to. So, as Zeta said, it's because Planet X, our Earth, as hard as this may be for some people to believe, stopped in its orbit in 2003, although benign aliens are being allowed to tip our North Pole toward the sun and away for winter and summer seasons. But if you really take a check on it all, you see that the constellations are not right, etc. So, Planet X has us trapped in its headlights. It's outbound from the sun. It is a particle flow around this giant planet, which is several times larger than Earth, 23 times as massive. The particle flows are like creating an eddy flow that forces Earth and even Venus to be trapped in its path. And as it approaches us, its North Pole continues to point toward Earth, creating all kinds of electromagnetic disturbances. But the South Pole, likewise, is pointing toward the sun, creating this quiet zone, because the South Pole of a magnet is its intake, magnetic intake, and therefore the surface of the sun is more quiet. The Zetas have said this is very superficial. The sun doesn't even know Planet X is there and doesn't care. But we think, these sunspots and blips and blaps on the sun are a big deal. So when we see it quiet, we say, wow, look at that. So now, averse this quiet sun, we have had electromagnetic blasts coming from Planet X. First, one was in January 21st, I think, and another July 21st. very dramatic and shown washing over the Earth. There's a website in Japan that does solar magnetosphere simulations. I finally got it out. And I have this on my website in my newsletter, examples of this, where there would be this sudden wash and the sun was absolutely asleep on those days. They could not ascribe it to any kind of a solar flare or anything like that. And during these times, people would get an odd kind of a nausea, where I had that myself this last July, where I thought, well, did I eat something? Have I got the stomach flu? And then it would go away. And it lasted for several weeks, and people all over the world were reporting this on message boards. So in addition, there's a hole in the Earth's magnetosphere 4 times the size of Earth in the direction of the sun. And NASA is saying, well, there it is, but we don't know what to make of it. Well, guess what? Planet X is 4 times the size of Earth. So there's admissions from, some of these magnetosphere tracking sites that there's an object out there that is electromagnetic. Then we had the downing of Air France 447 right over the Atlantic Rift when it was facing the sun. Well, actually, it was in the middle of the night, that this happened when it was in opposition.
What's your take on that crash? Because I've heard stories about a possibility of a meteor hitting that plane.
No, the Zetas were quite clear, and there was no sign of fire. It wasn't a bomb that went off. Nobody was burned. There was an oil slick. If you have a bomb in an explosion, then the fuel burns. It wasn't that. And they had a meteor. They had 4 minutes of the computer there saying all its electrical systems were closing down. Well, a meteor wouldn't allow even that 4 minutes. So this is somebody trying to produce a cover up on this. The Airbus, which another one went down, I think somewhere east of Africa also. The Airbus is completely electronic and does not have any manual overrides of the plane like all other big planes do. So when the electrical systems were going out, the pilots could not control the wings or the flaps or anything manually. So that's why it went into a spin and hit the ocean. What caused the electrical systems to go down? It was over the Atlantic Rift, almost precisely, and the Atlantic Rift is a surface magnet, according to the Zetas, that is subject to being tugged and pushed by Planet X when it lines up with Planet X as it's coming out from the sun.
Exactly where is the Atlantic Rift located?
From Iceland to South Africa, it forms a kind of an S. It goes between, the Americas and Europe and Africa, and it forms kind of an S shape, but it runs down the center of the Atlantic. And this is where, as we have continental drift or rip, the continents pull apart. Molten magma bubbles up and hardens, and this usually happens during a pole shift time, and because there's so much magnetic influence at that time, the magma, the little iron molecules in the magma harden and pointing all in one direction, which makes it like one big magnet. It's a surface magnet. So we had one of these blasts from, electromagnetic blasts. At the same time it was that Air France 447 was over the Atlantic Rift. At the same time they had turbulent weather, which tended to, spin the plane around. Triple whammy, as the Zetas said, and they've detailed that, and I have that on an article on my website.